Hello and welcome to another interview with one of our fantastic GMs here at Mastermind Adventures. My name is Kayleigh Reichman. I am the adventure specialist at Mastermind, and we have Stacy here. Stacy, how do you say your last name?
Harrell.
Harrell. Stacy Harrell. Awesome. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, not too bad. Excuse any
Of
random screams or shouts. I have my little one in the background, so he
course.
might get a little excited when he sees me get excited.
Totally. Totally fine. So I would love to just start by talking about how you got started with tabletop games. What was your introduction?
Oh man, it's kind of weird to talk about a little bit for me because I don't think I came into tabletop traditionally speaking. I know a lot of people who are like, yeah, I can remember playing D&D at like 10, 8 years old with my dad or something like that. I don't have that type of experience. Um, my experience is reading a bunch of R.A. Salvatore books. My experience is reading a bunch of Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms and falling in love with that stuff and like wanting to create those types of stories for myself and stumbling across D&D years and years and years later. Like I was almost in the military. I want to say I picked up my very first D&D book at like 17, 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like late bloomer for a lot of people. And I was just about to go into the Coast Guard. And I remember picking up this slasher book. It wasn't even a D&D book. It was a completely different system. I want to say it was like a Green Ronin Fate system or something like that. And I got really into the way that someone took the idea of a slasher fic and went, hey, we're going to turn this film into a playable game. Like, it just fascinated me to no end. And I tried to get my friends on board to play with me, and they never wanted to play. I finally met somebody in the military who was like, yeah, I'll DM for you. That never panned out. So I had all of his source books. And I was like, well, if no one else is going to DM me and I don't have any friends to play with, I guess I could just, dive into this stuff myself. And I fell in love with all the different types of characters and classes and races. Um, and my very first time actually playing a game of D&D, I was the DM, and it was one of my military buddies. He was like, "Hey, I know you've been talking about wanting to do D&D for like ever, and I have a bunch of people who want to play, and we don't have a DM. Would you be willing to DM?" It's like, sure, why not? So that was my introduction to tabletop games. Um, and it's like this really, really weird progression for me personally thinking about it because it's like, well, I don't have a tabletop mindset in a lot of ways. I have a storybook mindset in a lot of ways and a storyteller's mindset in a lot of ways. So my games are not what a lot of old school gamers would consider traditional D&D, I guess is the best way to put it. Um, but I love it either way.
Yeah, can you elaborate on what that means to you in terms of not traditional of a storyteller's mindset? How you
um,
define that? Hmm.
when I think about traditional D&D, I think very very much the wargaming mindset, where it's, hey, your quote unquote your DM is your adversary in a sense, and the world is dangerous. So the game part of it is the tactical combat, the um how can I optimize my character to do this thing? Oh, well, I don't need magic powers if I have a bunch of torches and a bunch of dogs that I can, put down there at camp and then send the dogs out. Drama is what drives the overall play of my games versus the combat and the tactics driving my games.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think you came into that from growing up on fantasy novels and things?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have a love for not just fantasy novels, but story overall. And my wife hates this. I have a love for tragedy, like nobody's business. One of my absolute favorite stories of all time, and my one of my favorite films is the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Romeo and Juliet.
Mm.
And it's because it's such a wonderful tragedy. And tragedies to me are like the basis of any and all drama. It can be hard to put yourself into the shoes of a hero, or put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't look like you or who doesn't have the same experiences as you. I feel that drama helps with it, because one of the quintessential human experiences is suffering. Drama really hones in on that and allows you to step into other people's shoes far better than something like comedy or action, because those things focus on the external instead of on the internal. And I've always been super heady. I've always been super like, what makes people tick. And because I don't just want my games to be, oh, we're here to be heroes. I want my games to be, hey, we're here to explore something other than ourselves. Um, and you could be the hero, you could be the villain, but at the end of the day, for the most part, we're all the villain in somebody's story. The world isn't black and white; it's a bunch of shades of gray. So I try to take that type of ideology into my game, which can be a little weird for some people, but I do try my best to keep this sort of realistic characterization of things in my world.
My question was going to be, and I think you've sort of explained it, but just how do you, I guess, how do you make your world still feel fun to explore and fun to be in, while still having that element?
Um, the thing that I feel that makes tragedy fun is overcoming it. When you ask actors, why did you like playing the bad guy? What's your favorite
Yeah.
role? Most actors will say being the villain. Why? Because I get to play the bad guy. I get to do something that I normally wouldn't be able to do. And I feel like that's the thing about drama that makes it fun. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to go with this idea of, oh, this is a tragic story, and because it's a tragic story, it's automatically going to have a sad ending. It's
Mm.
automatically going to
Yeah.
be this thing where I'm never going to overcome it. And it's like, we can go that direction, or we can go the opposite direction. And I feel like tragedy is can be twofold: a lesson about, or actually, it's a lesson in either way, a lesson of what to do and what not to do, how to overcome and how not to overcome. And that's what tragedy and drama does really well. All right.
So, in terms of, you're talking about stuff that can sometimes be difficult to navigate sensitively or might bring up maybe personal, maybe things that the players do want to explore. How do you keep that in a safe environment and keep it, to a level where everyone is comfortable exploring that?
So I try to take the same approach that most films do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, actually, let me rephrase that, because that is not the case anymore. How films used to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because there used to be a time period where um, you can imply things without having to show them. And I think a lot of time, like, as storytellers, implication and subtext is very powerful. And you don't need to be explicit to get your point across a lot of the time. Example, there was a really rough scene that I had with one of my players a while back. And it was essentially, I was specifically doing this with this player because of something that he said to me about his character. His character was a person who was growing fond of the party, but was still to himself, didn't want to get connected or attached to anyone because he had lost his brother. And at the same time, he still viewed himself as responsible for the people around him. So I had a scene where I had a character blame him for the death of another character. It's like, she was fond of you. She spoke so highly of you. How dare you? Oh my goodness! And it got pretty tense. And I remember asking him after the fact, like, "Hey, so like, are you and I okay? Like, I want to make sure because that felt a little heavy for me." And he was like, "No, we're okay. I like the way you went about it because you weren't addressing me necessarily, you're addressing the character." So a lot of times what I try to do is very, very heavily focus on, okay, well, is this your character thing or is this your thing?
Mm.
Now, if it's your thing, that's something that you and I need to discuss, and we need to, like, hey, like, if this is something, like, if you want to explore manic bipolar disorder, and because you have family members who are manic bipolar, cool, that's great, that's awesome. Two things. One, I'm going to need some guidance from you as the player to let me know what is and isn't okay. And two, as the DM, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that it's understood, like, hey, this is not a representation or a stereotypical thing that I'm trying to present to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is your character. And if there is anything that crosses those lines, let me know. I'm always big on that. I'm never, I tend to try my best to have a assistant or co-DM, because I found that it works out really well for easing tension and
Mm.
letting people feel as if you can be talked to. Because as a DM, there's this being behind the screen for whatever reason makes people feel disconnected from you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you have to facilitate with this understanding of, like, hey, people aren't always going to come to you when they feel uncomfortable. So what I do a lot of is I'll say, hey, who's up for being my co-DM or being my assistant DM in this, helping me put together the game, getting players together. And when somebody offers, I sit them down and I say, hey, look, what I'm going to be expecting of you is to keep your thumb on the pulse of the party,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try my best to make sure that everyone is engaged, that everyone is safe, and that everyone's okay and on the same page. But I'm counting on you to be my backup. I'm counting on you to be the person to go, hey, such and so said X, Y, and Z, or this, that, and the other. People are talking about this, so that I can have a better, because I'm still gonna ask, but I'm the DM, and for whatever reason, because I hold that title, I know that people aren't always going to be forthright. So that's my, like, number one. My absolute number one is, hey, have an assistant DM,
Mm.
be the party liaison.
Yeah.
So if there's any problems, and I always let the party know this, like, hey, if there are any problems and you do not feel comfortable coming to me, go to this person. They will gladly relay any information to me. If you feel like for whatever reason I'm hard ass, or I'm not nice to talk to, or whatever, like I'm intimidating, go talk to them, okay? And that has worked out really well. And the second thing that I do is I try to nip things in the bud really quickly. I recently had this happen where I had two party members start PvPing, and it derailed the campaign. I was too tired to address it. When I finally got a chance to address it, I had to let them know, like, hey, look, at my table, I have no problems with PvP. I have no problems with that because I believe that it adds to drama, and inter-party conflict is real. There's no place on the planet Earth where you can go and people are in groups and they don't have problems of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that you may not like a party member. However, you're in the middle of a plot point. Everyone else around you is trying to achieve this goal. The two of you started fighting about something that had nothing to do with the situation at the time. Now, if there was no plot point at that moment, I could care less. If you guys were in downtime or it was watch or something like that, and you guys were just having a talk and it went sour, fine. Would have been perfectly okay with it. But because of the way in which it happened, I felt that it was um, encroaching on other people's fun. And it's not like I just randomly thought about this and was like, oh, this is the thing. No, I made sure it's like, hey, I feel this way. Co-DM, by the way, I felt this way about the situation. Am I the only person that feels this way? Should this be something that I address, or is this something that I should let slide? And by having that second person, that second point of contact to be like, hey, even though I'm the DM and it's quote unquote my table, I have someone that I can bounce something off of and go, hey, am I overreacting on this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, super helpful, super helpful. So, having had that conversation with people, I find that it works when you do your best to address things in such a way where it's like, look, I'm not attacking you, I'm not coming at you sideways, I'm not um, trying to encroach on your fun in any way. What I am trying to do is make sure that everyone at the table is happy. So if this is the type of game that you want to play, I will do my best to facilitate that. But what I ask of you is to be aware of X. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. Some players perfectly fine with that. I've had maybe 2 players in the entire time that I've been a dungeon master that have been like, oh well, if that's the case, bye. I don't want to be a part of the table anymore. Um, so far so good.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it is just a matter of, finding the right fit, finding the right uh, DM for your particular interests and situations. So
Yep.
it's good to be reminded of. So I would love to hear about your games, what you have going for Mastermind.
So I currently have the Golden Palm. I have 3 of them up there. One second. Let me actually pull. I have the Golden Palm campaign, which is my take on a homebrew desert climate, or desert campaign. I've been thinking about running a desert campaign since the first time I heard about Marquette. Um, in in Critical Role, like for whatever reason, whenever they went to Marquette and Critical Role, it like sparked this thing in my head, like, oh man, that's like a really really awesome idea. This idea of this desert where instead of like what would happen if the sands of the Sahara Desert were completely black?
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen if Atlantis, the Aztecs, and the Egyptians were all smashed together and put into a civilization dropped in the middle of that desert? And now it's destroyed and there are people out searching for it. So it is a relic hunters and treasure hunters as well as explorers, or not explorers, sandbox game. So it's very very much a let's see what happens. Let's explore the entirety of this place. The starting point and the starting goal is to find this one city that has all this gold and wealth and so on and so forth, analogous to Atlantis. But in reality, the world is yours to make your oyster. And then I also have the nest, which is specifically a relic and dungeon delve. So it's specifically a mega dungeon that I've been working on for like the past 6 years or so. And this mega dungeon is really really fun for me because with the release of this band's Treasury Dragons, like I'm super, super excited because the concept that I had for it was what would happen if a dragon's horde was cursed and then made sentient? Yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially, the backstory and the premise of the nest is there's this massive this ancient worm who, in order to get rid of the worm, this council of wizards came together and said, "Hey, we can't kill it, but we can take its treasure." And essentially, because they couldn't get rid of the worm, they were like, "All right, we're gonna make all of his hoard of gold and magic items and trinkets and so on and so forth. We're gonna make it magical and sentient and see if that gets him away." So they essentially have made this living this living layer that just moves from place to place. And essentially the spell that they put on it was like a fear effect of sorts, that so the gold is afraid of dragons. So if you're draconic bloodline in any way, shape, or form, um, you can't reach it. You can see it, you can find it, but it'll never be something that you can touch. So you could go and reach for it, and it'll always recede just a little bit. Every time you try and touch it, it's like, eh, kind of like when you're in the pool and your dad keeps walking back as you're swimming.
Yeah.
So that one I really like, and I think is a whole lot of fun because the very first time I played that with my home table, and it was a two-man game. Two of my normal players, and one of them happened to be a dragonborn, and he didn't understand why the entire time he was like trying to grab something. He just kept going back and back and back and back and back. I mean, you can stay down here all day long and try, but it's not really gonna. The dwarf that's with you can pick up anything. Like he's picked up like 6 things now, and he's just like, what's going on? I'm like, well, what do you want? Have him grab it for you. That one's one of my favorite little dungeons to run. A lot of old school like traps and monsters in it because I really really like fourth and 3.5 for their monsters. Um, and finally, the third one I have, if I remember correctly, is the Red Brigade. Brigade. If I remember correctly. I have that wrong. But the premise of that one is essentially a mercenary. Um, what happens when a group of war vets or a war band becomes the center of political intrigue and um, political pawns? They don't want to be. And the whole point of that story is following the party, the last survivors of this war band, as they try to clear their names and either clear the names, run, take revenge. Choice is really up to the party at that point, but hopefully they try to clear the names.
That one I have up as the Will Keepers. Is that
Yes,
the title for that?
sorry,
Okay,
the world
great.
keepers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So a little bit of uh, players having to decide which sort of uh,
yeah.
alignment and moral decisions they have to make
Oh yeah.
along the way. Yeah, interesting.
I'm really big on that type of stuff. So I like the Will Keepers Guild is probably one of my more involved games in terms of like characters, places, NPCs, and like really getting down to the nitty gritty of like, okay, why is your character the way they are? Who are they? What are they about? What are their real motivations? Yes, you have a party motivation, but I need to know what your motivation is. Um, Whereas the nest is it's just a fun dungeon delve, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more so good old, let's get in there, grab some treasure, kill some monsters. There's not much to it than that. And then my Golden Palm game is something that I don't see a whole lot of games that do exploration um, as how do I put this? I don't see a lot of games that do exploration like um, AAA video games do. And what I mean by that is when you pick up Skyrim and you start moving inside of the game and you know that you can go n- nearly anywhere from jump, it's daunting, but it's also like really, really awesome because you can just go and just walk in a direction and discover something. You can literally just walk in a direction and go, okay, I'm going east, and you'll run into something to do. And I don't think I've ever played a game where that's been a thing. So it's been something I've been wanting to test out for a really long time. And especially inside of this section of my world,
Mhm.
I've been building the world that I have for my games for well over a decade now. And this is not a place that I've been able to explore myself. So it'd be really nice to be able to have some other people to explore it with. Like, hey, we're going through this together. So that's sort of my let's do this in tandem game.
So you'd say you're like exploring it as much as your players would be because you don't know exactly what is in the
Yeah,
so and so direction. Is that fair to
yeah.
say?
It's
Yeah.
very, very open world, very, very sandbox. I don't know what stories will come out of it. I don't know um, what I know what things are in the world. I know what types of people are in the world, what types of locations, but I don't know what type of stories will come out of that.
Mm.
I really believe in exploration of not just the world, but of your character and of different stories. So
And you also have a podcast, correct? A D&D podcast?
yes. So my D&D podcast, to call it a D&D podcast, might be a bit of a stretch
Mm-hmm.
for some, but I
Mm-hmm.
like to think of it as a dramatized actual play. If you've ever watched Critical Role, if you've ever watched Dimension 20, any of those, um, very analogous to that. But the idea being there's no one else at the table but myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, very similar to Me, Myself, and Die with Trevor Duvall. Definitely recommend that show if you haven't watched it. Season 3 is about to come out. Um, and the idea is I'm exploring my world. I'm exploring the game just as much as anyone else would be exploring the game. I'm doing so by myself. I'm DMing myself and telling those stories. And currently, I have a backlog of something like 7 or 8 episodes, all written up. We're still in the process of recording, so be on the lookout for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is it's very different from traditional tabletop with a group,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it is no less fun. And I hope to share it with other people because I get to focus a little bit more on story. I get to focus on the drama. I get to focus on my characters. So I can take whatever type of pace that I want to take. And currently, one of my, I guess I'll drop this in because I feel like this was a really interesting character for me to
Yeah.
explore. One of my recent characters within the game, I didn't realize this that she was going to turn into this, but she is a kobold who is a soul knife. Um, and her relationship is that she is attached to the main character's brother as his um, sort of eyes and ears. She calls herself his occasional blade. And in the process of trying to figure out, okay, where's the story going to go from here? It's like, does she have the ability to, I don't know, shapeshift and change into, like, can she disguise herself? I feel like this is an appropriate time to figure that out. Rolled some dice, found out that she could disguise herself, and now she has a whole other personality, Ilvit. And I'm like, oh, and it's all due to a ring that was given to her by said brother. Made a few more rolls, asked a few more questions, come to find out, oh, the ring is actually cursed. So this little set of like maybe 3 or 4 rolls that I made to kind of figure out where the story was going came up to be that in the long run, this ring is going to be a bad deal because every time she uses the ring to turn into her other self, Ilvit, Avli, the kobold, might stay as Ilvit if she fails a saving throw. And the longer she stays as Ilvit, the more divergent her mind becomes. The more divergent her mind becomes, the more and more personality shifts she has. So it's like she's supposed to be the eyes and ears of this person who isn't necessarily a good person. She knows he's not a good person, and she's still loyal to him, but she's working, Ilvit is working in direct connection in conjunction with his rivals. So it's like, okay, so this might end up badly. This could be a really interesting story thread to watch unfold because, and I don't know what's going to happen because it's like, so she might turn on the person that she trusts because of the magic ring that she has. Oh man. So like I'm really excited about like being able to explore different facets of different characters and being able to go, well, yes, the game is about this one PC, but because I'm the DM, I can move the camera wherever I want.
Yeah.
And we can focus on these characters for a little bit and you can get more information about what's going on over here, but we're focusing on this. And it seems like it has nothing to do with anything, but it all comes back and ties together. So that's part of the reason why I really, really have been enjoying like solo. Because, and I've been trying to think about how can I bring some of that same dynamic storytelling aspects of solo gaming into group play. And the camera thing has been really, really useful. Because I can give my players information or tell them things or show them things without having to give them a role, without having to make them do anything for it. I can have my cutscenes, so to speak. And I'm still working out the kinks on how best to do it without it feeling too clunky or without it feeling out of place. But I think I've gotten it down to something that's really nice where if my players trigger something in game, I can go, oh well. Meanwhile, this over here is happening. Like you as players know this, your characters know, but you as players know this, so that we are all on the same page at the table. And it's been really, really helpful, actually. Really, really, really useful. So my podcast is in part experiment
Hmm.
for a lot of my homebrew and a lot of my
Awesome.
own like stuff that I want to try out at my tables, as well as story and entertainment. So
Nice.
hopefully people like it. When it comes out, it will be under, let's see, make sure I am not saying things out the side of my mind. All right, so it will be under Driftless, and that is, you can actually find me currently. I have a couple old episodes up on anchor.fm. That is DRIFTLESS, Driftless. So go ahead and give some of those a listen. Hopefully, you guys like them. Like I said, they're much older, so these are a lot of world building episodes, a lot of characters that I was able to explore a while back. And I hopefully will get a chance to explore again one of my favorite characters, Sorrow, the Watcher. Um, It also helps me with my voice acting, so there's that.
Great.
But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could definitely talk to you for like another hour, but we only have so much time, so I will wrap things up. Um, Definitely check out Stacy's games at our website at Mastermind. If you would like advice about signing up for either any of Stacy's games or any of our other fantastic GMs, you can email me at KREICHMAN at mastermindadventures.com. Yeah, is there anything else you would like to plug besides your games, besides your podcast? Anything else you would like to say to wrap things up?
One final thing I will say is
Mm-hmm.
I'm working currently on my world garden. And what is a world garden? If you've never heard of the term PKM, personal knowledge management, or digital garden, it's like somewhere between taking a bunch of notes and having your notes live live for people to watch and a blog. And my idea is to present to my players as well as the rest of the world a series of stories and serials all within my game worlds. And hopefully that will be coming out soon under the same domain name driftless.com. So hopefully we will see that within like the next 3 months or so. So yeah, I got,
Awesome.
I got I got a bunch of fantasy stuff in the works, man. A bunch of
Hey,
fantasy.
definitely keeping busy. All right. Thank you so much, Stacy, for having this chat. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a great day.
Later, guys.
Bye. I'm still trying to find a like good sign off for these. I haven't found one yet. I will eventually. It's my side quest. Keep doing games. Nope, that's not sticking. That one's not going. Bye.